any problems with him. I always, we got along very well. I had a great deal of respect for him. He likewise for me, I think.
Yes, he said that.
And I'm glad that he did come back with us. I don't know. I didn't say anything to him. I don't have any, any grudges against him.
We were best friends for a long time. It started in '93 when I was on a mission and dominating, and the Phillies were dominating. I got a note in the clubhouse from saying Charlie Sheen wanted to meet me. So I went and actually, there's a good chapter in the book about it, and I talk about.
You see Lenny Dykstra on the left side of that split screen and Reggie Jackson on the right, and the question that sits in white text right between them is absolutely brutal. Reggie was horrible. That is the claim. That is what millions of baseball fans believe when they look back at his career and stack it up against the true immortals of the game. Reggie Jackson is the all-time strikeout king with 2,597 whiffs. He hit just .262 for his entire career. He made 142 errors in the outfield. He fought his own teammates. He divided clubhouses. He was a one-tool player in an age that demands five-tool excellence. When you compare him to the real legends, the comparison falls apart completely. His Hall of Fame induction in 1993 felt controversial to many baseball purists. They argued he did not belong in that shrine. They said his numbers were hollow. They said his fame was built on moments, not excellence. And if you want to give this video a little extra push while we dig into the wild Reggie story, tap the hype feature and give it some hype. Here's the thing though. Yes, all of that is true, but the story is way more interesting than just saying Reggie was trash. Because a flawed player who struck out constantly and could not field still somehow became one of the most famous names in baseball history. The real question is not whether his flaws were real. They absolutely were. The real question is, why does a player with so many problems become so legendary? That is the paradox we are actually exploring today. It is the paradox that defines sports history. It is the paradox that shows us that talent and fame are not always the same thing. Let me set the measuring stick first. When we talk about the true immortals of baseball, we are talking about a very specific tier. These are not Hall of Famers. These are not good players. These are the Titans. These are the absolute gods of the sport. Babe Ruth is in there. Willie Mays is in there. Hank Aaron is in there. Ted Williams is in there. Lou Gehrig is in there. Ty Cobb is in there. These 6 names represent the peak of what baseball perfection looks like. And Reggie Jackson asked us to compare him to these 6. He claimed a place at the table. And when we actually do that comparison, things get really ugly really fast. Let us start with number 5, and that is Ty Cobb. Ty Cobb hit 366 for his career. He got 4,189 hits. He stole nearly 900 bases. His entire game was built on pressure. He would bunt. He would steal. He would run the bases with intelligence and aggression. When Ty Cobb came to bat, the defense had to think. They had to prepare. They had to execute. Every single pitch was a chess match. Cobb understood the game at an intellectual level. Reggie Jackson played the opposite way. His game was the 3 true outcomes: home run, walk, or strikeout. And strikeout was way too common. When Reggie Jackson struck out, the opposing pitcher did not have to make a play. The defense did not have to get ready. Reggie basically bailed them out. He took pressure off instead of putting it on. Cobb understood that putting the ball in play forces mistakes. He understood that errors happen when the ball is in motion. Jackson understood that swinging as hard as possible sometimes looks cool on television. That is the fundamental clash between these two philosophies. Cobb was a technician who mastered every aspect of the game. Jackson was a brute who relied on raw power. Cobb would figure out what a pitcher wanted to throw and then not swing at it. Jackson would swing at everything. Cobb would manufacture runs with small ball and intelligent base running. Jackson would wait for his moment to hit one out or strike out trying. These are completely different approaches to baseball. Number 4 is Lou Gehrig, the Iron Horse. Gehrig drove in 1,995 runs in just 17 seasons. He averaged nearly 150 runs batted in every single 162 game season. Jackson drove in 1,702 runs over 21 seasons. That means Gehrig did it in 4 fewer years and did it more efficiently. Gehrig was also a leader. He played 2,130 consecutive games. He played through pain. He played through illness. He showed up. He led by example. Jackson was frequently benched. He was frequently injured. He was frequently embroiled in drama that kept him out of the lineup. But here's the real difference. Gehrig united the Yankees. Every player who played alongside him wanted to play for him. Jackson divided the Yankees. His teammates isolated him. His manager had to physically restrain himself from attacking Jackson on national television. That is not just a statistics thing. That is a character thing. That is a leadership thing. Gehrig lifted his team. Jackson weighed his team down. Number 3 is Ted Williams. Ted Williams is widely considered the greatest pure hitter who ever lived. His career on-base percentage was .482. Think about that. That means Ted Williams got on base almost 1 out of every 2 times he came to the plate. He reached base nearly 50% of the time. Reggie Jackson reached base roughly 1/3 of the time. His on-base percentage was .356. Williams treated hitting like a science. He divided the strike zone into 77 different cells and understood the probability of success on each pitch in each location. He understood exactly which pitches to swing at and which to avoid. He would walk 150 times a season. Jackson treated hitting like a brute force exercise. He swung hard and hoped for the best. He had no real philosophy. He just wanted to hit it hard. Williams led the league in home runs and in walks simultaneously. That shows you the kind of discipline he had. He did not sacrifice contact for power. He did not sacrifice walks for power. He had it all. Jackson sacrificed literally everything for power and still hit 151 fewer home runs than Ruth. Williams mastered the art of not making outs. Jackson was the king of the unproductive out. When you made an out in baseball, strikeout was the worst possible out you could make. It advances no runners. It forces no defensive errors. It puts zero pressure on the field. Jackson held the all-time record for strikeouts with 2,597. In plain English, that means for nearly 5 full seasons worth of at-bats, Jackson did not put the ball in play. He just failed. He just swung and missed. Williams almost never struck out relative to his walk rate because he was disciplined and smart. Jackson struck out because he was undisciplined and loose. Number 2 is Hank Aaron. Hank Aaron is consistency personified. He never hit 50 home runs in a single season, not once in his entire career. But he hit 755 home runs over his career, more than anyone else ever has besides Barry Bonds. He hit over 314 different seasons. He was a metronome. You could predict his output season to season. He would get you 40 home runs and a 300 average almost every year. Jackson was a streak hitter. He would carry a team for 2 weeks and then completely disappear for a month. Aaron struck out only 1,383 times in his entire career. Jackson struck out 2,597 times. That is almost exactly double. Aaron hit more home runs while striking out half as often. How is that even possible? It is possible because Aaron understood the strike zone better. He had bat control. He could put the ball in play. When Aaron swung, he connected. When Jackson swung, he sometimes just missed completely. Aaron also faced immense racial hostility when he was chasing Ruth's home run record. He received death threats. He received hate mail. He received constant pressure from people trying to intimidate him. And Aaron responded with quiet dignity and grace. He did not court controversy. He did not feud with the media. He did not try to create drama. He just played great baseball every single day. Jackson also faced racism in his career, but his response was often to court the camera and create headlines. Aaron is the professional's professional. Jackson is the showman. In terms of actual output over an actual season, Aaron provides significantly more value. Number 1 is Willie Mays. Willie Mays is widely considered the greatest all-around player in baseball history. He could impact a game in 5 different ways. With his bat, with his glove, with his arm, with his legs, with his mind. He won 12 Gold Gloves. He was the greatest defensive center fielder in the history of baseball. He made plays that seemed impossible. He had the ability to track fly balls in ways that defied explanation. He had the arm strength to throw out runners at home plate from deep in center field. He stole 338 bases, and he did it efficiently. His success rate was over 75%. Jackson stole 228 bases, but was caught stealing 115 times. His success rate was just 66%. In sabermetrics, when your success rate drops below 75%, you are hurting your team. You are running yourself out of scoring position. You are taking unnecessary risks. Jackson was flashy but inefficient on the bases. He would make the aggressive play look exciting even when it was a bad decision. Mays was smart and efficient. He would make the right play and you would not always see it because it was not dramatic. Jackson committed 142 errors in right field. That is a less demanding position than center field. He won 0 Gold Gloves. Mays won 12. That is a massive difference. The defensive metrics are called DWAE. Defensive wins above replacement. It measures how many wins you add or subtract with your defense. Mays had plus 18.2 DWAR. That is elite. Jackson had minus 12.0 DWAR. That means he actively hurt his team when he was playing defense. If he hit 30 home runs but gave back 15 runs in the field through errors and poor positioning, his net value was drastically reduced. Mays could win a game with his glove alone. If Mays went 0 for 4 at the plate, he probably saved 2 runs in center field. Jackson went 0 for 4. He likely contributed absolutely nothing to the win. He was bat only. He was a designated hitter forced to play the field. Mays was a complete player. That is the fundamental difference. And then there is Babe Ruth. Babe Ruth is not just the greatest baseball player ever. He is the most dominant athlete in the history of sports. Ruth hit 714 home runs. He hit them in roughly 8,399 at-bats. That means he hit a home run every 11.76 at-bats. Jackson hit 563 home runs in 9,864 at-bats. He hit a home run every 17.5 at-bats. Ruth was approximately 50% more efficient at hitting home runs than Jackson, and Ruth played in an era where the baseball was not as lively and the stadiums were often giant. Ruth also did not sacrifice contact for power. He hit .342 for his career. Jackson sacrificed literally everything for power and still hit 151 fewer home runs than Ruth. Let that sink in. Ruth was more efficient, hit for a better average, and hit more home runs all at the same time. Ruth was also a dominant pitcher before he became a hitter. He won 94 games as a pitcher with a 2.28 earned run average. He was elite at 2 completely different positions at the highest level of baseball. Jackson was elite at essentially one thing: power hitting. That is it. When you look at career WR, which is wins above replacement, a comprehensive stat that measures total value to a team, Ruth's WAR is 182.6. Jackson's WAR is 74.0. Ruth is more than double. You could take Reggie Jackson's entire career, double it, and he would still be less valuable than Babe Ruth. That is the gap. That is the difference between a legend and a true immortal. So yes, when you compare Reggie Jackson to the actual immortals, the comparison is brutal. His strikeout record is brutal. His .262 batting average is brutal. The fact that he never hit 300 in a single full season is brutal. Every single one of those 6 legends hit over 300 for their careers. Jackson is the only one under that mark. He could not do the most basic thing in baseball at an elite level. He could not hit for average. He could not hit for consistency. He struck out constantly. To really understand this, you have to think about what 2,597 strikeouts means in real baseball terms. That is nearly 1 strikeout for every 10 plate appearances. That is roughly 25% of every at-bat ending in a strikeout. In a 162-game season with about 550 plate appearances, Jackson would strike out around 137 times. That is unheard of for an elite player. The Immortal struck out maybe 60 to 80 times a season at most. Jackson was striking out almost twice as much. The all-or-nothing nature of his game meant that if he was not hitting a home run, he was probably making an out. There was no in-between. There was no single or double. There was home run or strikeout. And when you think about the pressure moments in baseball, that is a catastrophic weakness. With runners in scoring position, you need contact. You need to be able to put the ball in play and let your teammates drive you in. Jackson could not do that reliably. He would either hit a home run or strike out looking. There was no way to manufacture runs. There was no way to work a walk and steal a base. There was just raw power or nothing. And then there is the defense. The 142 errors, the stone hands, the poor roots to the ball, the lack of instincts, the defensive liability that actually cost his team wins. When you watch film of Jackson in the field, scouts report that he did not have great instincts. He would sometimes misjudge fly balls. He would sometimes take poor routes to ground balls. He relied on his athleticism to recover rather than on technique and preparation. Advanced metrics prove it. His DWAR was negative. The scouting reports prove it. Contemporary accounts describe him as indifferent in the field. His lack of Gold Glove awards while playing alongside Aaron and Mays proves it. He was not a good defender. He was a bad defender. He was a liability. Every time he made an error, he was hurting his team. Every time he took a bad route, he was costing his team extra outs. Modern baseball has the designated hitter for exactly this reason. Jackson should have been the designated hitter. Instead, he was forced to play right field where his mistakes cost his team wins. The math works like this. If Jackson prevented maybe 10 or 15 wins with his bad defense over his career, but created 100 wins with his home runs, you might think that is a net positive. But when you are compared to Mays, who created 100 wins with his home runs and prevented negative plays with his great defense, suddenly Jackson is way behind. Mays could do everything. Jackson could only hit home runs. Let us talk about the postseason too, because that is his biggest claim to fame. He is Mr. October. He is the guy who shows up in the World Series when the stakes are highest. That is his entire reputation. That is the foundation of his legend. But here's the problem. The stats do not back it up the way people think. In the World Series, yes, he crushed it. He hit .357 with 10 home runs in 27 games. That is elite stuff. That is genuinely impressive. That is the kind of performance that gets remembered forever by millions of people watching at home. But in the League Championship Series, the rounds that lead you to the World Series, he hit .227 with 6 home runs in 45 games. That is a dramatic drop-off. That is pedestrian hitting. That is below average production. That is a massive gap between his World Series performance and his ALCS performance. That means his team often had to carry him through the first rounds so he could show up and perform in the final stage. That is not a true carrier of a team. That is not a true leader. A real genius player dominates all phases of the postseason. Ruth did it. Mays did it. Aaron did it. Jackson, he peaked in the most televised moments. He peaked when the cameras were hot. He peaked when millions of people were watching. That is just variance. That is just statistical variance. That is just getting lucky at the right time. Sabermetric research shows that clutchability is not a repeatable skill from year to year. It is mostly random and unpredictable. Jackson happened to peak when millions of people were watching on television. That is not a special attribute. That is not a repeatable skill. That is luck. That is variance. Let us also talk about the A's years. People say Jackson was the foundation of those teams that won 3 straight World Series in 1972, 1973, and 1974. But Jackson missed the entire 1972 World Series due to injury, and the A's won anyway. That tells you everything you need to know about his actual importance. That team could win without him. That team was built on dominant pitching with Catfish Hunter and Vita Blue. That team was built on solid defense. That team had chemistry and leadership that did not depend on Reggie Jackson. Jackson was not the foundation. He was an addition. He was a bonus. He was the extra power hitter on a team that did not need him to win. Same thing with the Yankees in 1977 and 1978. Those teams featured the best defense in baseball, with Greg Nettles making impossible plays every night. Those teams had Cy Young caliber pitching with Ron Guidry winning 25 games. The pitching was elite. The defense was elite. Jackson was the cherry on top. He was not the foundation. He was not the carrier. He was not the reason those teams won. He was riding great teams at great times. He was a luxury player on championship teams that were already built to win. That is a huge difference from being like Ruth or Gehrig, who carried their teams through sheer force of will. And then there is the clubhouse element. This is where the criticism really sticks. In a 1977 interview with Sport magazine, Jackson said something that absolutely destroyed his relationship with his teammates. He said he was the straw that stirs the drink. He said Thurman Munson, his own team captain, and the reigning MVP could only stir it bad. He said this before playing a meaningful game with the Yankees. He walked into a winning clubhouse that already had chemistry and leadership and immediately created division. He isolated himself. He made himself the outsider. That is not leadership. That is ego. That is arrogance at the highest level. Munson was beloved by his teammates. Jackson was a newcomer declaring himself superior to the team captain. The division that created lasted his entire time there. His teammates did not trust him. They did not like him. They tolerated him because he could hit home runs, but they did not respect him the way they respected Aaron or Gehrig or Ruth. That is a massive difference. Jackson also got into physical altercations with his own teammates. These were not small disagreements. These were full-on fights. He fought Billy North in the Oakland clubhouse in 1974. Billy North was his center fielder. These were supposed to be teammates working together toward a common goal. But Jackson's volatility created tension. The fight was so severe that catcher Ray Fosse, trying to break it up and do the right thing, suffered a crushed disc in his neck that effectively ended his career. Ray Fosse was a good player. He was trying to help, and Jackson's violence injured him permanently. That is the impact of Jackson's behavior. It did not just affect Jackson, it damaged his teammates. Then in 1977 with the Yankees, manager Billy Martin pulled Jackson for lack of hustle on a shallow fly ball. This was a legitimate baseball decision. Jackson was not running hard. Martin was trying to send a message. Jackson responded by challenging him publicly in the dugout. He argued back. He confronted his manager in front of the whole team. Billy Martin had to be physically restrained from attacking Jackson on national television. Coaches literally had to hold Billy Martin back from fighting Jackson in front of millions of people watching at home. That is not normal. That is chaos. That is exactly how toxic Jackson made the environment. That is exactly how much he rubbed people the wrong way. Later in life, Jackson became a vocal critic of players linked to steroids and performance-enhancing drugs. He said Barry Bonds should not be in the Hall of Fame. He said Mark McGwire should not be in the Hall of Fame. But critics point out the hypocrisy. Jackson's era was rife with amphetamine use. Greenies were everywhere in the 1970s. Jackson was not innocent. He was a disruptive force who prioritized his own brand over the team. He had no moral authority to gatekeep the Hall of Fame. He was the exact thing he was criticizing. You also have to understand the economic and cultural context. Jackson was the first big free agency test case. The Yankees paid him massive money to be a savior and a superstar. Lots of cash. Huge contract. When he struck out, fans saw a waste of money. When he made an error, fans saw a waste of money. Every mistake seemed magnified because he was so expensive. He was a mercenary. He was not a son of the franchise like Ted Williams or Lou Gehrig. He was a gun for hire. And when the gun misfired with all those strikeouts and errors, the backlash was intense and harsh. People viewed him as overpaid and overrated. The money he was paid created unrealistic expectations. When he could not meet those expectations on a consistent basis, he became a lightning rod for criticism. He was also just flashy in a way that offended purists and traditional baseball fans. The gold chains, the violent swing, the look-at-me attitude, the constant need for attention and spotlight. The way he played the game seemed disrespectful to the older generation. To them, baseball was supposed to be pure and technical and understated. Jackson made it loud and theatrical. His strikeouts looked ugly to them. His errors looked careless and reckless. His celebration looked arrogant and selfish. The critique of him being trash is partly a cultural critique of how he played the game. It is not just about statistics. It is about philosophy. It is about the way he approached baseball as entertainment versus a sport. Now, here is where we get to the real answer. Here is where we get to why this matters. All of what we just said is true. Reggie Jackson had massive flaws. He struck out constantly. He could not field. He was inconsistent. He divided clubhouses. When you compare him to Ruth, Mays, Aaron, Williams, Gehrig, and Cobb, the comparison absolutely falls apart. He is not in their tier. He is not close to their tier. He is in a different tier entirely. That is just a fact. Those six are marble statues. Reggie Jackson is made of plaster. He is painted bright colors and looks flashy, but under scrutiny, he cracks. But here's the thing. Reggie Jackson still became a legend despite his flaws. He still became Mr. October. He still became one of the most famous names in baseball history. And that fact tells us something really important about how fame works in sports and in entertainment. Fame is not just about total value. Fame is not just about WAR or home run totals or batting averages. Fame is about moments. Fame is about memory. Fame is about the biggest stages. Reggie Jackson may have been a mediocre or below average player in the ALCS regular season games, but he was elite in the World Series. His team had to carry him to October, and then he showed up when it mattered most. Those World Series moments became the defining memories of his entire career. That is how he got famous. That is how he became Mr. October. That is how he earned his legend. It was not about total value. It was about peaking at exactly the right time on the biggest stage. Think about how many people watch the World Series versus how many watch the regular season or the ALCS games. Millions more watch the World Series. It is on every single network. It is the pinnacle of baseball competition. If you hit a home run in the World Series, millions of people see it. If you strike out in the ALCS, nobody remembers it. Jackson understood this intuitively well. He understood the power of the moment. He understood that baseball is not just a game. It is a story. It is entertainment. It is television. He played to the moment. He peaked when the cameras were hot. That is not a skill you can put in a statistics book. That is showmanship. That is performance. That is star power. And that is why he became famous despite his flaws. Because baseball, like all sports, is not just about the best players. It is not just about the most complete players. It is about the most memorable players. It is about the players whose names become synonymous with greatness in the public imagination. Michael Jordan was arguably not the most complete basketball player ever, but he was the most clutch. He was the most memorable. He performed on the biggest stage when it mattered most. The public memory is not fair or scientific. The public memory favors the dramatic. The public memory favors the moment that was watched by millions. Jackson understood that. He understood how television works. He understood that one dramatic World Series home run would be remembered forever by millions of people. He understood that 1,000 regular season strikeouts would be forgotten. He played to it. He leaned it into it. And it worked spectacularly well. That is his real genius, not his baseball skills. His understanding of fame and television and memory, and how the public constructs legends. So the real answer to why Reggie Jackson was called trash by critics is complicated. Yes, he was trash compared to the Immortals. His statistics prove it. His flaws were real. But he was also brilliant at one thing. He was brilliant at creating memory. He was brilliant at performing. He was brilliant at becoming famous. He was a one-tool player, but that one tool was stardom. That one tool was the ability to make people remember him. That one tool was the ability to become a legend, despite not being as great as the legends. The complicated truth is this. Reggie Jackson belongs in the Hall of Fame for his impact on the game, but he does not belong at the table of the Immortals. He is not Ruth. He is not Mays. He is not Aaron. He is not Williams. He is not Gehrig. He is not Cobb. He is a different kind of legend. He is a legend built on moments and memory and star power rather than complete excellence. He is a flawed legend. He is a controversial legend. He is a legend that people will debate forever, but he is still a legend. That is the paradox. That is the real story. The strikeouts were real, the poor defense was real, the clubhouse drama was real, the inconsistency was real. All of that stands, and yet he still became one of baseball's greatest names. That tells us that sometimes in sports and in life, being the best at everything is not what makes you legendary. Being the best at one crucial moment in front of the most people is what makes you legendary. Being able to perform when millions are watching. Being able to create a memory that lasts forever. That is its own kind of greatness. It is not the same as being a five-tool player. It is not the same as being a complete athlete, but it is real, and it matters. So yes, Reggie Jackson was flawed. Absolutely. When the critics said he was horrible compared to the actual Immortals, they were right. The statistics back it up. The analysis backs it up. The scouting reports back it up. His career batting average of .262 is brutal. His 2,597 strikeouts are brutal. His 142 errors are brutal. His negative defensive value is brutal. All of it is brutal. He was not as good as Ruth. He was not as complete as Mays. He was not as consistent as Aaron. He was not as disciplined as Williams. He was not as durable as Gehrig. He was not as skilled at small ball as Cobb. He was worse than all of them in almost every measurable way. But he was better at one thing. He was better at becoming famous. He was better at creating moments that lasted. He was better at being on television and being remembered. He understood that in the modern era, in the 1970s baseball era, baseball was increasingly about entertainment and star power. The free agency era was changing the game. The media was changing the game. Personality was becoming as important as performance. Jackson understood this before almost anyone else. He leaned into it. He made himself famous. He made himself legendary. He made himself Mr. October. That is not nothing. That is actually a different kind of genius. The debate will go on forever. Is he overrated? Yes, absolutely. When compared to the actual Immortals and complete players. Is he underrated? Perhaps when you consider his ability to perform under pressure and create legendary moments that defined an era. Is he in the Hall of Fame for the right reasons? Maybe not. His numbers do not justify his induction compared to other players. Is he still one of the most important figures in baseball history? Absolutely, without question. He changed how players could market themselves. He showed that you did not need to be the best player to become the most famous. You did not need to have the best statistics. You just needed to understand the moment and own it. You just needed to understand television and star power. That is a lesson that extends far beyond baseball and far beyond sports. That is a lesson about fame and power and attention and performance in the modern media-driven world. So what is the real verdict? Reggie Jackson was a flawed, one-dimensional, strikeout-prone, defensive liability of a player who does not belong in the conversation with the greatest baseball players of all time. When compared to the true Immortals, he comes up woefully short every single time. His statistics prove it conclusively. His career batting average of .262 is an aberration among Hall of Famers. His strikeout record is still a mark of inefficiency rather than excellence. His defense was a net negative. His clubhouse presence was toxic. All of that is true and cannot be disputed. But he was also a legend. He was also Mr. October. He was also one of the most memorable baseball players in history. He belongs in the Hall of Fame. But he belongs in a different section than Ruth, Mays, Aaron, Williams, Gehrig, and Cobb. He belongs in the section for legends built on moments, rather than complete excellence. He belongs in the section for players who understood how to become famous. That is his true legacy. That is his real story. That is the complicated, messy, contradictory truth about Reggie Jackson. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think Mr. October is overrated? Do you think the criticism of Reggie Jackson is fair and justified? Do you think his World Series moments make up for his regular season inconsistency and his poor defense? Tell me in the comments below. Like this video if you want to see more deep dives into baseball history and baseball legends and the real stories behind the stats. Subscribe if you have not already because we drop new videos all the time exploring baseball greatness. And if you really enjoyed this exploration of one of baseball's most controversial and fascinating figures, hit that notification bell so you never miss when we go live. Thanks for watching.
Lou Brock was a symbol of great base stealing, but today I'm the greatest of all time. Thank you.
Baseball. What was the passion? I know you were pretty darn good.
You know, it's funny you use that word passion because I believe that to participate in sports, you got to have a passion.
Right.
And the passion is your dream, and most of the time when you have this passion,
He can't play for shit. Might not be the exact words one MLB legend used about Rickey Henderson, but the sentiment was there, loud and clear. When one of baseball's greatest base stealers stood at the podium, after breaking a historic record, he didn't just celebrate. He humiliated the man standing right next to him, and that was just the beginning. 7 baseball legends harbored deep, burning resentment toward Rickey Henderson, and their reasons cut to the very heart of what baseball was supposed to be about. Henderson was talented, sure. He was statistically dominant, but talent doesn't excuse everything. And for these 7 icons, Henderson crossed lines that should never have been crossed. If you're already hooked by this story, give this video some hype because it only gets more revealing from here. Behind every stolen base and every highlight reel moment was a man who made enemies of his own teammates, managers, and the legends who came before him. This is the story of how Rickey Henderson's ego divided the baseball world like few players ever have. Let's start with the man who should have been celebrating alongside Henderson, but instead felt publicly humiliated. Lou Brock was baseball royalty, the king of steals. A dignified speedster who retired with 938 stolen bases and carried himself with the grace expected of a true champion. Brock studied the game. He calculated every move. He represented the old guard, where you let your statistics speak for themselves and treated the game with reverence. When Rickey Henderson approached Brock's all-time stolen base record in 1991, the baseball world expected something special, a passing of the torch, a respectful acknowledgement from the new generation to the old. Instead, what happened on May 1st, 1991 became one of the most uncomfortable moments in baseball history. Henderson needed just 1 stolen base to surpass Brock's record. The stage was set at the Oakland Coliseum. Brock was on the field, standing just feet away from third base, ready to congratulate the new king. But Henderson had other plans. After successfully stealing third base for his 939th career steal, Henderson didn't embrace Brock. He didn't offer a humble wave. Instead, he lifted the base above his head like a trophy of conquest. Then he grabbed the microphone, and standing right next to Lou Brock, the man whose record he just broke, Henderson declared to the world, Lou Brock was the symbol of great base stealing. But today, I am the greatest of all time. The crowd roared.
I'm the greatest of all time. Thank you.
But Brock felt something else entirely. Shock, embarrassment, disrespect. This wasn't just a statement of fact. It was a violation of everything baseball stood for. The night before the game, Brock had approached Henderson privately. He offered to help him write something to say, understanding the magnitude of the moment and the pressure that comes with it. Henderson declined. He wanted to speak from the heart. Brock later revealed what he felt that day, saying Henderson wasn't prepared, and that what shocked him most was how exposed Henderson was while going for a major record. Brock believed you needed someone helping you handle that kind of attention. Henderson chose to go it alone. But the real wound was deeper. Brock explained that when he chased records, most of the guys he was chasing were already gone. He was just chasing paper. Henderson not only came face to face with history, but Brock was there physically, standing right beside him. And Henderson used that moment to make it entirely about himself. The phrase, "I am the greatest of all time," borrowed the swagger of Muhammad Ali, but applied it to a sport that values the team over the individual. Brock felt reduced to a prop in Henderson's coronation. They had eaten dinner together the night before. They even played cards. But that public speech severed their professional bond. Brock represented an era where humility mattered. Henderson represented an era where you spoke louder than your stats ever could. The numbers tell part of the story. Brock finished with 938 stolen bases and a 75.3% success rate. Henderson would eventually retire with 1,406 stolen bases and an 80.8% success rate. He was better. Everyone knew that. But the way Henderson handled the transition left a permanent scar. Brock felt Henderson lacked the grace required of a champion. The disappointment wasn't about losing the record. It was about watching the ritual of baseball history get desecrated by ego. Brock had shown nothing but respect to the legends who came before him. He expected the same. Instead, he got a man who cared more about his own glory than honoring the game's traditions. What made it worse was that Brock had genuinely tried to help Henderson prepare for that moment. He understood the spotlight. He understood the pressure. He knew what it was like to have all eyes on you when history was being made. But Henderson rejected that guidance, and the result was a speech that will forever be remembered as one of the most tone-deaf moments in sports. Brock wasn't just disappointed in Henderson's words. He was disappointed that Henderson didn't understand what it meant to be a steward of the game's history. To Brock, you held records in trust for baseball itself. To Henderson, records were personal trophies to be displayed with maximum fanfare. Carlton Fisk saw things differently than Brock, but his hatred for Henderson was just as real. Fisk was a Hall of Fame catcher who embodied the granite-hard, blue-collar work ethic of New England. At 6'3" and 200 pounds, Fisk was an imposing figure who viewed baseball through the lens of suffering and sacrifice. He once said that if the human body recognized agony and frustration, people would never run marathons, have babies, or play baseball. To Fisk, the game was a contest of will. You worked hard, you played hurt, and you never ever drew attention to yourself. Rickey Henderson was the complete opposite of everything Fisk believed in. Fisk despised Henderson's snap catch, a flashy maneuver where Henderson would catch a fly ball in the outfield and violently snap his glove downward, often tapping his thigh or posing for effect. To a catcher like Fisk, who spent decades squatting in the dirt, enduring foul tips, and blocking home plate against charging runners, this was unnecessary showboating. It showed up the pitcher, it showed up the batter. It suggested the game was easy, and nothing offended Fisk more than the suggestion that baseball was easy. Henderson's home run trots were equally infuriating. He would take a slow, leisurely stroll around the bases, sometimes drifting wide into the grass to admire his shot. Fisk, who famously waved his own home run fair in the 1975 World Series with frantic energy, viewed home runs as miraculous events to be respected, not personal showcases. Henderson's style was all about delay and ego. It violated the efficiency and humility Fisk prized above all else. Fisk played the game with intensity that bordered on obsession. He caught more than 2,200 games in his career. He played until he was 45 years old. Every single game was a battle, and every single pitch mattered. When he saw Henderson treating routine plays like performances, it felt like a personal insult to everyone who had suffered through the grind of a 162-game season. Fisk believed baseball was about dignity and competition. Henderson's antics stripped away that dignity and replaced it with theater. On August 2nd, 1985, the chaos Henderson created collided directly with Fisk's disciplined order. The Yankees were playing the Chicago White Sox. It was the bottom of the 7th inning, tied 3-3. Bobby Meacham was on second base. Dale Berra was on first. Henderson stepped up to the plate and crushed a drive to deep left center field. The ball was hit so hard and so high that the runners couldn't tell if it would be caught. Meacham retreated to second to tag up, thinking Luis Salazar might catch it. Berra, meanwhile, assumed the ball would drop and ran full speed towards second. When the ball hit the wall, missing a home run by inches, both runners started sprinting. Meacham stumbled. Berra nearly lapped him. Both came barreling around third base toward home plate, separated by only a few feet. Fisk stood at the plate watching this circus unfold. The relay throw came in from shortstop Ozzie Guillen. Meacham tried to slide and knock over the 200-pound Fisk. Fisk sidestepped like a matador and tagged Meacham out. Then he immediately spun around and tagged out Berra, who was right on Meacham's heels. It was an 8-6-2 double play, a rarity, and a total humiliation for the Yankees. While Henderson wasn't the one tagged out, the play symbolized everything Fisk hated about him: the chaos, the lack of fundamentals, the circus atmosphere that seemed to follow Henderson everywhere. After the game, Fisk said he anticipated more of a crush at the plate, but was just fortunate he didn't stand in Meacham's way. For Fisk, Henderson represented the me-first attitude that led to such breakdowns. The runners were distracted by Henderson's power, or perhaps trying too hard to avoid Henderson yelling at them for clogging the bases. Fisk viewed the entire sequence as symptomatic of a league losing its discipline, and Henderson, who framed million-dollar bonus checks instead of cashing them, was the poster child for the wealthy, flashy free agent era. Fisk, who was unceremoniously released by the White Sox via a visit to his hotel room, resented the pampering that stars like Henderson received. The snap catch was just the visible symptom of a deeper disease Fisk believed Henderson had infected baseball with: the prioritization of style over substance. Goose Gossage took Fisk's disgust and amplified it with pure rage. Rich Goose Gossage was one of the most feared relief pitchers in baseball history. He threw fastballs with violent intent and believed pitchers had the right and the duty to intimidate batters. For Gossage, baseball was combat, and Rickey Henderson was a hot dog, a player who valued style over substance and humiliated opponents through excessive celebration. Gossage's hatred for Henderson was visceral and lasted decades beyond their playing days. Gossage couldn't stand the way Henderson pimped his movements, the intricate adjustments to his uniform, the exaggerated leads off the base, the staring down of pitchers, the slow trots around the bases. In Gossage's era during the 1970s, such behavior was met with a fastball to the ribs. The hot dog label meant Henderson was performing for the crowd rather than competing with integrity. To a pitcher like Gossage, who relied on a menacing presence on the mound, Henderson's antics were a direct challenge. Henderson's signature move, what some called the Rickey Rally, was particularly humiliating. He would walk, steal second, steal third, and score on a sacrifice fly. But he did it with a flair that screamed superiority. He would dust off his pants even when he hadn't slid. He would talk to himself or to the fielders while on base. He turned routine plays into spectacles every single time. Gossage viewed Henderson as the embodiment of everything that was going wrong with baseball. The game was becoming softer. Players were becoming celebrities instead of warriors. The unwritten rules that had governed the sport for generations were being tossed aside in favor of individual expression and entertainment. To Gossage, this wasn't progress, it was degradation. Henderson wasn't just breaking the rules, he was mocking them, showing that you could succeed wildly while ignoring everything the old guard held sacred. Gossage's disdain ran so deep that it extended well past their playing days. He once said he told Henderson that when they met in an old-timers game, he was going to get him. He was going to get a hit off Henderson, stop the game, and retrieve the ball. This wasn't professional rivalry, this was personal hatred. Gossage wanted to humiliate Henderson in return, to invert the dynamic where Henderson had so often embarrassed pitchers. To Gossage, the game was a zero-sum contest of respect. If Henderson was pimping a home run or a steal, he was stealing respect from the pitcher. Gossage represented the brushback era of baseball. He pitched for the Yankees in the late 1970s and early 1980s during a time of turmoil and grit. He viewed Henderson's stylistic flourishes as a softening of the game. Henderson was the beginning of a generation of players who cared more about their brand than the battle. When Gossage left the Yankees for the San Diego Padres in 1984, he hoped to leave the circus behind, but Henderson's influence was league-wide. The fact that Henderson was successful while acting this way only made Gossage angrier. It signaled the death of the intimidation factor that pitchers like Gossage relied upon. When Gossage called Henderson a hot dog, he was mourning the loss of fear in the batter's box. He hated that Henderson could act that way and get away with it because the rules and the culture were shifting to protect hitters and encourage offense. Tony La Russa brought a different kind of hatred to the table. La Russa is widely regarded as one of the most cerebral, intense, and controlling managers in baseball history. A lawyer by trade and a strategist by nature, La Russa viewed a baseball team as a cohesive unit where the sum was greater than the parts. He pioneered the modern use of the bullpen and demanded meticulous preparation from everyone. Rickey Henderson viewed himself as an independent contractor, a company of one. Their conflict during their time together with the Oakland Athletics was a collision between collectivism and extreme individualism. The breaking point came in August 1995. The Oakland Athletics were struggling, and Henderson was unhappy with his contract status. He felt underpaid compared to the market and engaged in a silent protest. La Russa, usually protective of his players, finally snapped after a game where Henderson scratched himself from the lineup. La Russa publicly blasted Henderson, stating that the outfielder had declared himself mentally unavailable for the game. This was damning. Physical injury is understood and respected in professional sports. Mental unavailability due to contract disputes is interpreted as quitting on the team. La Russa's frustration poured out in brutal fashion. He said Henderson put himself in a position where he was embarrassing himself and the team. La Russa believed Henderson had special talent, but he was wasn't a great player because baseball is a team game, and you have to be as interested in the team as yourself. That piece was missing with Rickey. Those words cut deep because they came from a manager who had seen Henderson at his best and his worst. The root of La Russa's frustration was Henderson's transparent financial motivation. Henderson was famous for his contract disputes. He once told management, "All I'm asking for is what I want." There's a famous story that perfectly illustrates the disconnect. Henderson received a $1 million signing bonus check. Several months later, the Athletics accounting department called in a panic because their books were off by exactly $1 million. The money hadn't been withdrawn. When they asked Henderson about it, he revealed he had framed the check and hung it on his wall at home instead of cashing it. For a manager like La Russa, who demanded total us against them unity, this behavior was baffling and infuriating. It showed that Henderson viewed the money and the symbol of the money as more important than the practical operation of the team. Henderson would reportedly refuse to spend his per diem money on road trips, saving it in envelopes instead. His eccentric fixation on finances highlighted everything La Russa hated about him. La Russa found Henderson unmanageable because the normal leverage points didn't work. Most players responded to appeals to team glory or fear of benching. Henderson responded only to what Henderson wanted. When Cleveland expressed interest in trading for Henderson in 1995, Henderson became disgruntled not because he loved Oakland, but because he felt out of the loop. While La Russa acknowledged Henderson's ability to rise to the occasion in the big moment better than anybody he'd ever seen, the daily maintenance of Henderson's ego and the constant threat of him checking out mentally drove La Russa to the edge. La Russa hated the uncertainty. With Rickey, you never knew if you were getting the MVP or the guy who was mentally unavailable because of a contract clause. What made the situation unbearable for La Russa was the precedent Henderson set. Other players watched Henderson get away with his behavior. They saw him make his contract disputes public. They saw him put his personal interests above the team, and some of them started thinking they could do the same. La Russa was trying to build a championship culture where everyone sacrificed for the common goal. Henderson was teaching the opposite lesson. Take care of yourself first, and the team will have to deal with it. That corrosive influence was something La Russa could never forgive. Reggie Jackson brought ego into the equation in a whole different way. Reggie Jackson and Rickey Henderson are two of the biggest personalities to ever wear the Oakland A's and New York Yankees uniforms. When their careers intersected, particularly when Henderson arrived in New York in 1985, the result was a high-stakes battle for the spotlight. Jackson, known as Mr. October, thrived on being the straw that stirs the drink. Henderson, who referred to himself in the third person constantly, was equally convinced of his own centrality to the baseball universe. The friction between Jackson and Henderson was a battle for alpha status. Jackson had established himself as the premier attraction in New York during the late 1970s. He famously feuded with Thurman Munson and Billy Martin to assert his dominance. He believed he was the engine of the team. When Henderson arrived in New York, he brought a similar level of self-assurance and a playing style that demanded attention. Two massive egos in one clubhouse created inevitable conflict. Jackson viewed himself as the mentor and the elder statesman. He expected deference. Henderson, however, did not do deference. There's a telling story about Henderson asking Jackson to sign a ball for his mother, but then forcing Jackson to sign it alongside him, establishing them as equals rather than fan and idol. Jackson would ignore people he felt were beneath him, while Henderson would sometimes be more accessible. This created tension that neither man could resolve. A tangible artifact of their rivalry is a check written by Reggie Jackson to Rickey Henderson for $1,000 in 1991. The check sold for over $14,000 at auction years later. The memo line on the check read "All-Star Ticks," implying Jackson was reimbursing Henderson for tickets to the All-Star game, but both men were all-stars with ample access to tickets. The prevailing theory is that it was a gambling debt. On the back of the check, above his signature, Henderson wrote, "I am the best card player." This seemingly trivial detail reveals the pettiness of their rivalry. They competed at everything: baseball, salary, cards. The fact that Henderson felt the need to write "I am the best" on the financial instrument of his victory was a final twist of the knife. Jackson hated losing, especially to the younger, brash Henderson. Their hatred was a sibling rivalry writ large. Two massive egos in a room too small to contain them both. Neither man could stand being in the other's shadow, and their conflict poisoned the clubhouse atmosphere wherever they crossed paths. The rivalry extended beyond just personal slights. Both men craved the attention of the media. Both wanted to be quoted. Both wanted their faces on magazine covers. When Henderson started getting that attention in New York, it cut into Jackson's territory. Jackson had been the undisputed star, the guy everyone wanted to talk to. Suddenly, there was competition, and Jackson, who had fought fought so hard to establish his brand as Mr. October, wasn't about to share the stage without a fight. The result was a cold war in the clubhouse that made everyone around them uncomfortable. Bobby Valentine experienced Henderson's selfishness in perhaps the most shocking way of all. Valentine, manager of the New York Mets in 1999, was known for his intense, often frantic management style. He was a micromanager who wore his emotions on his sleeve. The 1999 National League Championship Series against the Atlanta Braves was a high-pressure crucible. The Mets were underdogs, scrapping for every inch. In Game 6, an elimination game that went into extra innings, Valentine found his authority directly challenged by Rickey Henderson in one of the most surreal acts of insubordination in playoff history. The date was October 19, 1999. The Mets were fighting for their playoff lives in Game 6. The game was a seesaw battle that eventually went into extra innings. Henderson had been removed from the game in the late innings as part of a double switch or defensive replacement. Instead of staying in the dugout to cheer on his teammates during the most critical innings of the season, Henderson, along with teammate Bobby Bonilla, retired to the clubhouse. Reports surfaced later that the two were found playing cards while the game was still in progress. This wasn't a pre-game ritual. This occurred during the 10th and 11th innings of an elimination game. Valentine was reportedly livid. The act was a show of defiance. Henderson was angry that Valentine had replaced him with Melvin Mora in the 8th inning of Game 4 and was protesting his lack of playing time by checking out of the game entirely. For a manager like Valentine, there is no greater sin than a player abandoning his teammates during battle. The optics were devastating. While teammates were crying and screaming in the dugout after the heartbreaking loss, when the Mets lost on a walk-off walk by Kenny Rogers to Andrew Jones, they walked into the clubhouse to see their veteran leaders playing cards. One source affiliated with the team noted that players wanted to take a bat to their heads. Valentine viewed this as a personal betrayal and a professional disgrace. It confirmed every negative stereotype about Henderson, that he was a mercenary who cared only about his own stats and playing time, that he possessed zero emotional investment in the team's collective fate if he wasn't the star of the moment. The incident effectively ended Henderson's tenure as a serious impact player in New York. Valentine, who prided himself on extracting maximum effort, could not forgive the apathy. The hatred Valentine felt was that of a general whose soldier deserted his post in the heat of battle to play a game of chance. What made the incident even more infuriating was the timing. This wasn't a regular season game in July. This was the postseason. This was everything baseball players supposedly dream about. The chance to win a championship. The chance to be a hero. And Henderson couldn't even be bothered to stay in the dugout to support his teammates because he was upset about playing time in a previous game. It showed a stunning lack of perspective and priorities. Valentine never forgot it, and neither did the players who were crying their eyes out while Henderson shuffled cards. Orlando El Duque Hernandez experienced Henderson's cruelty in a more personal way. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, Henderson was a baseball elder, having played in 4 different decades. He used his longevity as a weapon to belittle opponents. Orlando Hernandez, known as El Duque, had a vastly different path to the majors. A star in Cuba, he defected to the United States on a small boat, risking his life to pitch in the major leagues. He was a rookie in 1998 at age 32, bringing a wealth of life experience and a unique high-leg kick pitching style. During a dispute on the field, likely involving a hit-by-pitch or a brushback pitch, Rickey turned to El Duque and delivered a withering insult. He said, "When I broke into the game, you were crawling on your hands and knees." This comment was viewed by many peers as deeply offensive, arrogant, and factually dismissive. It infantilized El Duque. Henderson was asserting that he was a grown man playing Major League Baseball while El Duque was a toddler. But the facts didn't even support the insult. El Duque was born around 1965, meaning he was a teenager in Cuba during Henderson's rookie year in 1979, hardly crawling. But the accuracy mattered less than the intent. Henderson wanted to humiliate. The comment also showed cultural insensitivity. Dismissing the struggle of the Cuban defector who had overcome immense geopolitical barriers to stand on that mound showed a lack of respect for El Duque's journey. Henderson often used his tenure to silence critics or demand privileges. He famously told Steve Finley, who offered him a seat on the bus due to tenure, that Rickey had been playing at least 16 or 17 years. But the comment to El Duque was malicious. It wasn't about a seat on the bus. It was about status on the diamond. For El Duque, a proud competitor who pitched with high emotion, Henderson's comment was a violation of peer respect. It exemplified why so many contemporaries struggled to like Henderson despite his talent. He refused to view them as equals. To Henderson, everyone else was a guest in his league. The hatred here was personal, born of Henderson's need to belittle others to maintain his own sense of superiority as his skills declined in his twilight years. El Duque had risked everything to play baseball in America. He left his family behind. He escaped on a boat, not knowing if he would survive the journey. He had to prove himself all over again in a new country, in a new league, at an age when most players are established veterans. And Henderson dismissed all of that struggle with one condescending line. It wasn't just arrogant, it was cruel. It showed that Henderson saw other players not as fellow competitors, but as obstacles to his own glory. When you look at these 7 stories together, a pattern emerges. Lou Brock felt publicly humiliated when Henderson turned a record-breaking moment into a selfish coronation. Carlton Fisk was disgusted by Henderson's flashy style that violated baseball's work ethic. Goose Gossage raged against Henderson's hot dog antics that destroyed the fear factor pitchers relied on. Tony La Russa was exhausted by Henderson's individualism and contract obsessions that put himself above the team. Reggie Jackson clashed with Henderson in a battle of egos that poisoned clubhouses. Bobby Valentine was furious when Henderson played cards during an elimination game instead of supporting his teammates. And Orlando El Duque was insulted by Henderson's condescending dismissal of his entire career and journey. Each conflict reveals a different facet of the same truth. Rickey Henderson was baseball's mirror, forcing others to confront the sport's evolution from the we of the mid-century to the me of the modern era. Henderson didn't just steal bases. He stole the peace of mind of the establishment. He represented a shift toward individualism, personal branding, and transparent financial motivation that the old guard found repulsive. To them, he made a mockery of the game they worshipped. The common thread running through all these conflicts is respect. Henderson demanded respect for his talent, but refused to show respect for the traditions, hierarchies, and unwritten rules that governed baseball. He wanted to be recognized as the greatest, but wouldn't acknowledge the contributions of those who came before him or stand beside him. He expected special treatment, but wouldn't make sacrifices for the team. This created a fundamental disconnect between Henderson and the baseball establishment that could never be bridged. But here's the thing, Henderson changed baseball forever. He didn't just break records, he redefined what it meant to be a leadoff hitter. He brought electricity to the game, he made fans stand up and pay attention. Yes, he was hated by legends who couldn't reconcile his style with their values. Yes, he alienated peers with his ego and his antics. But he also inspired a generation of players who realized they didn't have to follow the old rules anymore. Henderson proved you could be great on your own terms. The hatred these 7 legends felt toward Rickey Henderson wasn't really about him. It was about what he represented, the end of an era, the death of humility as a virtue, the rise of the athlete as a brand. Henderson was the bridge between the stoic icons of the past and the superstars of the present. Bridges get walked on, they get criticized, they get resented, but they also connect 2 worlds that otherwise would never meet. Rickey Henderson was undeniably one of the greatest players to ever step on a baseball diamond. He holds records that may never be broken. He brought a style and swagger to the game that captivated millions. And yes, he made enemies along the way, lots of them. But in the end, he made sure every single one of them remembered his name. That's the mark of greatness, even if it comes with a cost. He might have been hated by the legends, but he earned his place among them, and that's something nobody can ever take away.
I'm the greatest of all time. Thank you.
I'm happy to look in the camera now and say I never bet on baseball, and I never bet on Cincinnati Red baseball.
Did you bet on baseball?
Yes, I did, and that was my mistake. I was wrong. I just stupid. Worst thing I ever did in my life.
Any player, umpire, or club, or league official or employee who shall bet any sum whatsoever upon any baseball game in connection with which the bettor has a duty to perform shall be declared permanently ineligible. Permanently ineligible.
He can't play for shit. That's what baseball's greatest legends keep saying about Pete Rose. And they're not talking about his ability to hit a baseball or his talent as a player. They're talking about who he is as a person and what his actions meant for the entire sport of baseball and its legacy. Most people who follow baseball remember Rose as a legend, a guy with more hits than anyone in history, 4,256 hits spanning decades. 3 World Series championships won with his team, 17 All-Star selections throughout his career. The numbers are truly extraordinary and unmatched by any other player in baseball history. The statistics make him look like one of the greatest players ever to step foot on a baseball field. But that's not what Johnny Bench thinks about Pete Rose when asked directly. That's not what Joe Morgan believes about him as a person. That's not what Hank Aaron says when asked about Rose's place in baseball.
That's not what Bob Gibson stands for as a pitcher who believed in purity. That's not what Mike Schmidt feels in his heart as someone who was Rose's friend. That's not what Goose Gossage knows to be true about the man and what he did. These men all played the game at the highest level possible. These men all understood baseball at the deepest and most profound level. These men all worked their entire lives to perfect the game and protect it. And these men all turned away from Pete Rose completely and utterly because they saw something beyond the statistics that made them unable to forgive him or support him. They saw his betrayal of everything baseball stands for. They saw his violation of the trust that makes the game work. They saw his choice to put money before integrity. And that's why they can't support him. If you're watching this right now because you want to understand why the greatest baseball players in history rejected Pete Rose despite all his hits and championships, then hit that hype button and let me know this story matters to you. Your hype helps spread this video to more people who care about baseball history and the truth about what went down. This isn't about whether Rose could hit a baseball. Everyone knows he could hit better than almost anyone. This is about integrity. This is about trust. This is about whether the rules matter. This is about whether character means anything in baseball. This is about why one person's actions can stain an entire sport and hurt millions of fans who believed in the game. The legends are about to explain why Pete Rose was shit, and it has nothing to do with batting average or home runs. The story of Pete Rose starts perfectly like something out of a movie. A guy nicknamed Charlie Hustle. Mickey Mantle gave him that name because he played with such intensity. Whitey Ford gave him that name because he competed so hard. They called him Charlie Hustle because he'd run hard to first base even when he got a walk, when most players would just jog down the line. Rose sprinted. Rose pushed every single day. He played every game like his life depended on it. He played every game like it was the World Series. He played every game like it was his last game on Earth. Year after year, the hits kept coming and accumulating. Thousands of them. Tens of thousands of at-bats over a long career. By the time his career ended, he had the most hits of any player who ever lived in baseball history. The record seemed untouchable and unbreakable. His name was in the record books forever and always. Fans loved him and cheered for him. Teammates respected him and played hard with him. The baseball world saw him as a legend. Charlie Hustle. The guy who cared more than anyone else. The guy who would do whatever it took to win. The guy who had an unbreakable will to compete and succeed at all costs. But behind the scenes, something dark was happening that nobody knew about at first. Nobody saw it coming because it was hidden away. Nobody understood what Rose was doing in secret. When investigators finally revealed what Rose had been doing, when the truth came out into the open, everything changed forever. The legends who played with him saw his true nature. The legends who competed against him understood his real character. The legends who built the game with him could no longer support him. They couldn't forgive him. They couldn't move past it. No matter how many hits he had collected, no matter what his statistics showed on paper, because Rose had done something that baseball could never forgive. He had broken the sacred rule. He had violated the trust that makes baseball work at its core. Let's start with number 6. Goose Gossage was a relief pitcher who earned his reputation through his fierce, competitive nature. He threw hard. He pitched mean. He competed like his life depended on every pitch. Gossage believed that baseball was sacred ground. The field was sacred. The competition was sacred. The trust between players and fans was sacred. And nothing should ever compromise that sacred trust. No money, no gambling, no criminal activity. Nothing should ever taint the purity of the game. When Gossage talks about Rose, he uses one phrase that captures his absolute disgust and anger. Gossage believes Rose committed the ultimate sin against baseball and against the fans who loved the game and supported it with their hard-earned money and their passion and their emotions. The fans spend money. The fans spend time away from their families. The fans spend their emotions on games. They do this because they believe the games are fair and honest. They believe nobody is trying to cheat them or manipulate the outcome. They believe the result is real and honest and hasn't been fixed or influenced by gambling interests. That belief is sacred and fundamental to baseball. That belief is what makes the sport work. When Rose started betting on games, when Rose put money on outcomes, he destroyed that belief completely. He violated the sacred contract between players and fans. Gossage compared Rose's gambling to a structural defect in a building foundation. Nobody can see the crack from outside. Nobody realizes there's a problem looking from street level, but the crack ruins the whole structure from the inside. It makes the whole thing unsafe and unstable and dangerous. That's what Rose did to baseball. He created an invisible crack in the foundation of trust that holds the sport together. Gossage was also angry about something else that bothered him deeply. He saw Rose making serious money after he got caught and exposed. Selling autographs for high prices. Appearing at events and signing deals. Staying in the news constantly for all the wrong reasons. Making money from his fame while claiming to be sorry for what he did. Gossage saw that and understood the truth immediately. Rose wasn't sorry. Rose wasn't genuinely remorseful. Rose just wanted to protect his money and his image. That's when Gossage realized Rose was a profiteer, not a repentant man. Gossage sees modern baseball as hypocritical. The league partners with betting companies. Fans can bet on games legally. Some people say Rose shouldn't have been banned because of this hypocrisy. But Gossage rejects that. The hypocrisy of the league is separate from Rose's sin. It doesn't excuse what Rose did. A manager can't bet on his own team. That's cardinal sin. The field must stay pure. The people making decisions can't have money riding on outcomes. Fans lose faith. The sport suffers. Number 5 is Mike Schmidt, a Hall of Fame third baseman for the Philadelphia Phillies. More importantly, he was a friend of Pete Rose. A real friend. They played together on the 1980 World Series winning team. Schmidt saw Rose up close. He saw the talent and the intensity, but he also saw something darker. He saw a man who was self-destructive. Rose surrounded himself with criminals, organized crime figures, people running illegal betting operations. Rose had opportunities to change his path. The commissioners told him exactly what to do. Come clean completely. Show real remorse. Distance yourself from criminals. Stop gambling forever. Start over with a clean slate. But Rose refused completely. He was stubborn about it. He was arrogant. He believed he was above the rules that apply to everyone else. Schmidt watched this happen repeatedly over many years. He got tired. He got exhausted watching a friend refuse to save himself. Every chance Rose had to change, he made the wrong choice. Every opportunity to fix things, he rejected it. Rose's ego was the problem, his biggest obstacle to redemption. Rose believed his hit total was like immunity from consequences. He thought being great at baseball meant rules didn't apply to him. He thought his talent was a pass card that exempted him from the rules everyone else followed. Schmidt watched Rose destroy himself repeatedly. That hurt deeply. Watching someone you respected throw away every chance because they believed they were too important to fail, too important to face consequences, too important to change. Schmidt's eventually souring on Rose reflects a broader sentiment among his peers, a sense of exhaustion with a man who refused to save himself from himself, a sense of disappointment that someone so talented could be so blind to his own destruction. Rose could have been forgiven. Rose could have come back. But Rose refused because his ego wouldn't allow it. Schmidt's perspective shows something about competition and ego. Rose was a fierce competitor. That competitive drive made him great. It made him collect all those hits. It made him run hard every day. But that same drive turned into something dangerous. It turned into arrogance about his importance. Rose thought he could out-hustle investigators. Rose thought he could outwill the system. He thought his personality could bend reality. It couldn't. His refusal to accept that poisoned everything around him. It poisoned his relationships with teammates. It poisoned his legacy. It poisoned the way people remember him forever. Number 4 is Bob Gibson. Gibson was a pitcher for the St. Louis Cardinals during his storied career. His earned run average in 1968 was 1.12, exactly. Almost impossible to comprehend or understand. The absolute best season any pitcher has ever had in modern baseball history, since statistics have been kept carefully and recorded. Gibson pitched with a fierceness that's hard to imagine today in modern baseball. Every pitch mattered deeply. Every game mattered intensely. For a pitcher, the game is pure and simple and straightforward in its nature. You throw the baseball, the batter swings at it. Either he hits it or he doesn't get a hit. Either you get him out or he reaches base safely. There's no complexity or confusion here. There's no way to fake it or hide from the truth. Either you're better that day or you're not. Gibson believed that the integrity of competition was everything at the fundamental level. That integrity is what makes the game worth playing at all. That integrity is what makes winning something that actually means something real. If a manager was betting on games, that integrity disappeared completely from the equation and was destroyed. Every decision became about money instead of winning and being the best. The purity of competition got compromised at the core level. Gibson saw Rose's gambling as a direct attack on what made baseball meaningful and pure. Gibson had a specific phrase for what Rose did: forfeiture of legendary status. Gibson believed that once you compromise a game's outcome, you delete your own history. All those hits Rose collected don't mean the same thing anymore. All those games he won are tainted and corrupted. They're connected to the corruption. They're marked forever by the bad choices he made. Gibson didn't see Rose's gambling as a personal problem or sickness beyond his control. He saw it as a professional choice. A choice made deliberately to put money before the sport. Gibson had no respect for that kind of choice. Gibson loved baseball more than anything in his entire life. The thought that someone would use baseball as a tool for gambling was unforgivable. Absolutely unforgivable to Gibson's way of thinking. True hustle isn't about running to first base hard every single time, even on walks. True hustle is about dedication to the game's purity and integrity every single day. Rose wasn't hustling for the win anymore when he was betting. Rose was hustling for the payout. Rose was trying to get rich while playing a game that he claimed to love. Gibson found that unforgivable and incomprehensible. Number 3 is Hank Aaron, the home run king who hit more home runs than anyone in baseball history before anyone came close. When Hank Aaron talks about rules and what they mean, people listen carefully because they know he speaks from experience. His philosophy is simple and absolute, with no compromise or exceptions. Rules are rules, period. No gray area, no exceptions for superstars. Rule 21 is posted in every locker room in the big leagues, in multiple languages. It says you can't bet on baseball. You get banned for life if you do. That's it. The rule is clear and unambiguous. The rule is known by everyone. Every professional player knows Rule 21. Every manager knows it. There's no excuse for not knowing it. Rose knew Rule 21 completely. He was a sophisticated baseball man. He understood the game at the highest level. He knew what the rule said. He knew what it meant. He knew what would happen if he got caught breaking it. He chose to break it anyway. He made that choice willingly. Aaron saw Rose's later pleas for forgiveness as an insult to millions of other players who faced the same temptations and said no. Millions of players have dealt with gambling urges. Millions have faced financial stress and pressure. Millions have wanted to make more money. They didn't bet on baseball. They followed the rule. Rose wanted special treatment because he hit a lot of home runs. Aaron found that insulting and disrespectful. Aaron had endured Jim Crow laws personally. He had fought racism every day of his life. He had pushed through a system designed to exclude him and defeat him based on his race. And through all of that struggle, he believed in the rules, because the rules provided structure. The rules provided fairness. The rules said that ability mattered most, not race or wealth or status. Allowing Rose back would tell everyone that if you're great enough, rules don't apply anymore. That's not what baseball is about fundamentally. That's not what Aaron spent his life fighting for. That's the opposite of everything he believed in. Rule 21 exists because of history. It exists because of the 1919 Black Sox scandal, where players tried to fix the World Series for gambling money. That scandal almost destroyed baseball completely. It took decades for the sport to recover and rebuild trust with fans. The rule was created to ensure that nothing like that could ever happen again. The rule was meant to be absolute and permanent. No exceptions, no matter who the player was, no matter how great they were. The rule was the foundation of trust. Without Rule 21, baseball couldn't function. Without the prohibition on gambling, the game would be compromised forever. Aaron understood this history. Aaron knew why the rule existed, and Aaron stood firm that the rule had to mean something. Number 2 is Joe Morgan, a second baseman for the Cincinnati Reds who played during the greatest era of the team, a two-time National League MVP, a cornerstone and leader of one of the greatest teams ever assembled in professional sports history, the Big Red Machine. Morgan and Rose played together in the same infield. They were friends. They were teammates. But as the years went on and Rose lied repeatedly about betting, Morgan's perspective changed and hardened significantly over time. Morgan identified the lie as being worse than the original bet itself. Think about that carefully for a moment. The actual gambling was bad. The betting on games was wrong and against the sacred rules. But the lying over 15 years made it much worse than the original sin. From 1989 to 2004, Rose denied everything completely and consistently. 15 years of lies. 15 years of maintaining innocence. 15 years of claiming that he never bet on baseball. Then he wrote a book. Then suddenly he admitted it when it was profitable, only when there was money in it for him. Morgan saw that confession as hollow and completely meaningless and fake. Rose wasn't sorry. Rose wasn't genuinely remorseful. Rose just wanted to protect his money and his image and his reputation. Morgan became a strong voice for the idea that the Hall of Fame is more than just statistics and numbers. It's a shrine, a sacred place for people who elevated the game, people who played by the rules, people who showed character and integrity. The Hall of Fame has a character clause that matters deeply to voters and keepers of the institution. Morgan wrote a powerful letter to voters in 2017. He told them clearly to protect the Hall from cheaters. People who broke the fundamental rules, whether steroids or gambling, don't belong in the Hall. Morgan felt strongly that having Rose in the Hall would devalue every other plaque. It would send a terrible message that statistics matter more than character, that as long as you're great enough, you can cheat. Morgan couldn't accept that message. Morgan watched Rose's pattern clearly over decades. Denial after denial after denial. Then confession only when profitable. More defensiveness afterward. Continued gambling even after finally admitting it. Rose never learned his lesson. Rose never grew as a person. Rose never changed fundamentally. Rose just got better at managing his public image. Number 1 is Johnny Bench, a catcher for the Cincinnati Reds. The greatest catcher ever in baseball history without question. He was behind the plate during the same era as Rose. They were teammates. They won together. They celebrated together. They were part of something special together. But Bench saw something that nobody else could see. He saw the damage Rose was doing to the team's legacy and history. The 1975 and 1976 Reds were champions, dynasties, perfect. And then the Dowd Report came out in 1989. Investigators documented Rose's gambling, found betting slips, found calls to bookmakers. Suddenly, the conversation about those championships changed. People talked about scandal. They talked about betting slips. They talked about investigations. Instead of talking about the brilliance of the team, instead of talking about the greatest dynasty, the legacy was stained and tainted and forever marked. Bench felt like Rose stole something from him and his teammates. Rose stole the purity of their achievement. Bench and his teammates built that legacy together through hard work. It was theirs. Rose had no right to corrupt it. That's the stain Bench talks about. It's not physical dirt, it's reputation. It's the way people remember accomplishments forever. The 1975 championship should be remembered for brilliance. Instead, it's remembered with scandal. That's unfair to the other players. They worked as hard. They played as well. But their legacy got tainted by Rose's choices. If a manager is betting on games, every decision becomes suspect and questionable. Did he save his best pitcher for a game he bet on? Did he make a double switch because it was smart baseball, or because he had money riding on it? You can never know, and that not knowing ruins trust. It ruins the purity of competition. Bench understood the catcher-pitcher relationship better than anyone. That relationship requires absolute trust. Rose's gambling destroyed that trust. It destroyed the foundation of the Big Red Machine. In 1987, investigators found that Rose had placed 52 bets on Cincinnati Reds games. 52 bets in a single season. Each bet was between $2,000 and $10,000 per game. That's serious money.
That's not casual betting for entertainment. That's profit motive. That's someone trying to make real money through gambling on his own team. Rose's defenders argue and say he only bet on the Reds to win. They say he never bet against his own team. They say he was trying to help the team and the players. But the legends of baseball see this reasoning completely differently. They understand the logical flaw. If Rose only bet on certain games to win, that means, by definition, he didn't bet on other games. That means he signaled his own lack of confidence in those other games. That means some games mattered to him financially while other games didn't. A manager can't operate that way. A manager has to treat every single game with the same commitment and intensity. Every game matters equally. Every game is important. That's what makes a team function properly. But if a manager is betting financially on some games and not others, he's creating a managerial conflict of interest that destroys the purity of competition. Maybe he saves his best relief pitcher for games he bet on. Maybe he doesn't use his pinch hitter in other games. Maybe he doesn't try as hard in games where he has no financial stake. Maybe he makes different strategic decisions based on where his money is invested. That ruins the sport at its core. It compromises every single decision. It taints the integrity of every game. It makes every decision suspect and questionable. The legends understood this logical problem immediately. The legends could see that betting on some games but not others created an impossible situation where competitive integrity became impossible to maintain. The Dowd Report came out in 1989. This investigation documented Rose's gambling thoroughly. It revealed the systematic nature of his betting.
It showed that this wasn't a one-time mistake, but a pattern of behavior. Rose accepted a lifetime ban to stop the investigation from going further. Commissioner A. Bartlett Giamatti issued a powerful statement about integrity and fair play. The message was clear and unmistakable to everyone watching. This is unacceptable behavior. Baseball values integrity above all else in the world. But Rose didn't learn from it. He didn't change his ways. He went quiet and hoped people would forget about what happened. Then in 2004, when his book was being published and he could make money from a confession, Rose finally admitted to gambling. After 15 years of denials, after years of lying to the press, after years of claiming innocence, suddenly he admitted it when profitable. Bud Selig was the commissioner at that time. Selig refused to lift the ban. Selig said Rose hadn't shown genuine remorse for his actions. Selig said Rose was only confessing for profit.
Selig was right about that assessment.
The decision sent a clear message. Admitting guilt years later for money doesn't earn forgiveness. That's not how redemption works. That's not real remorse. That's just self-preservation. In 2015, Rose petitioned for reinstatement again. Rob Manfred was the commissioner. Manfred rejected the petition completely. Manfred said Rose was still gambling on baseball games. Rose was still breaking Rule 21. Rose was still refusing to change his ways. After all these years, Rose still hadn't learned the lesson that everyone else understood. Then in October 2024, Pete Rose died. And in May 2025, Commissioner Manfred announced that Rose was being reinstated. The ban was lifted. A.J. Przinsky, a two-time All-Star, said, "Permanent means permanent." The league was weakening the message. The league was teaching future players that if you wait long enough, consequences go away. The legends see this reinstatement very differently than the league does.
It confirms what they've believed all along.
Rose avoided real consequences for decades. He lied consistently for years. He only admitted guilt when it was profitable for him. Eventually, he got what he wanted, without truly paying the price. Now, he's eligible for the Hall of Fame. The Classic Baseball Era Committee will vote in 2027. That's when the real test comes. Will they listen to the legends? Will they remember what Bench and Morgan and Aaron and Gibson and Schmidt and Gossage all said about character and integrity? Or will they just look at the hit total? The legends are completely united on one fundamental point. The Hall of Fame is not just about statistics and numbers. It's about the kind of person you are. It's about whether you respect the game. It's about whether you follow the rules that everyone has to follow. It's about integrity and character above all else. The Big Red Machine wasn't just about Rose. It was about Tony Perez and his hitting and intelligence.
It was about Joe Morgan and his speed and smart base running. It was about Johnny Bench and his catching genius. They moved together like one organism. They communicated. They trusted each other. They won together. They became immortal together. They became legends together. Then Rose, while still connected to that organization, made decisions that compromised everyone's legacy forever. That's the stain that Bench talks about with such pain. It's not physical dirt. It's reputation. It's how people remember accomplishments forever. Baseball is forever. Your record is forever. If it's tainted, it stays tainted forever. As baseball moves forward into the future, fans have to make a choice about what they believe in and what they stand for as a community.
Will they listen to the legends who played the game at the highest level? Will they understand what Rose's actions really meant for the sport and for the integrity of the game? Will they respect the integrity of the game more than any individual player or manager? Will they understand that character matters more than statistics? The legends are betting that fans will understand this ultimately. They're betting that fans know the deep difference between being a great hitter and being a great person. They're betting that fans value the integrity of the game above all else. They're betting that the Hall of Fame will hold the line and protect what it means to be truly great. They're betting that the rules will stay meaningful and will stay enforced for everyone equally. The beautiful thing about baseball is that it can survive anything as long as people care about fairness and integrity and honesty. As long as fans believe competition is real and not fixed or manipulated by gambling. As long as players and managers respect the rules that protect everyone equally and fairly. Rose threatened all of that at its core. Rose tested whether the rules actually meant anything. Rose showed what happens when someone tries to bend the system. The legends said absolutely not to all of that. They've been saying no for decades. They'll keep saying no forever. And that's why baseball will be okay. Baseball will survive. Baseball will thrive. Not because Rose is banned. Not because the Hall of Fame is protected, but because there are people who care more about the sport than any individual. People like Johnny Bench, who understood the catcher's sacred role. People like Joe Morgan, who protected the Hall. People like Hank Aaron, who fought for meritocracy. People like Bob Gibson, who believed integrity was everything. People like Mike Schmidt, who spoke truth about ego. People like Goose Gossage, who fought for the fans. They've protected the game. They've protected integrity. They've protected the rules. And because of them, baseball will survive forever. The 2027 vote will determine whether the Hall of Fame sides with the legends or with statistics alone. It will determine whether character and integrity matter more than hits and records. It will determine whether the rules actually mean something or whether they're just suggestions for people who aren't famous enough to ignore them. The legends have made their case clear and unmistakable. They've explained why Pete Rose was shit not as a player, but as a person, and as someone who should have known better. They've explained why integrity matters most. They've explained why Rule 21 exists, and why it must be protected forever. They've explained why fans deserve better. The vote will show whether anyone still listens to the voices of the greats, who played the game right. The legends understand something fundamental about baseball that statistics can never capture. They understand that the game is bigger than any individual. They understand that rules exist to protect the game, and the fans, and the integrity of competition. They understand that when someone breaks those rules, they damage not just themselves, but everyone. They damage the fans who believed in them. They damage the teammates whose legacies get stained. They damage the sport itself. The legends have protected baseball by speaking the truth about Pete Rose, by refusing to compromise, by insisting that character matters. That's the real legacy that will endure forever. The legends' message is consistent and unwavering across all of them. Johnny Bench saw the stain that Rose put on the Big Red Machine. Joe Morgan saw the lie that lasted 15 years. Hank Aaron saw the violation of Rule 21 and meritocracy. Bob Gibson saw the attack on competitive integrity. Mike Schmidt saw the refusal to change and grow. Goose Gossage saw the betrayal of the fans who paid money and believed in fair play. Together, their voices form a chorus that says clearly that integrity matters, that character matters, that the rules matter, that baseball matters more than any individual. When Rose finally died in October 2024 and was reinstated in May 2025, the legends didn't celebrate. They didn't feel vindicated. They felt disappointed that the system had weakened, that the rules had been bent, that permanence didn't mean permanent anymore. They worried about what this says to future players. They worried about what this says to young people who look up to baseball. They worried that the message is now that if you're famous enough and you wait long enough, you can escape consequences.
That's not what baseball should teach. That's not the legacy that the legends fought for their entire lives. The game of baseball has survived wars and economic depressions and scandals and strikes and steroids and corruption. It has survived because there have always been people who cared more about the game than about money or fame or personal glory. There have always been people willing to stand up and say no to cheating and corruption. There have always been people willing to protect the integrity of the sport, even when it costs them something. The legends of baseball are those people. They are the protectors. They are the ones who say that rules matter, that character matters, that integrity is the foundation of everything good about the sport. And as long as there are people like Johnny Bench and Joe Morgan and Hank Aaron and Bob Gibson and Mike Schmidt and Goose Gossage willing to speak the truth, baseball will survive and thrive forever. So when you hear the legends say that Pete Rose can't play for shit, understand what they mean. They don't mean he couldn't hit a baseball. They don't mean he wasn't talented. They mean that as a person, as a competitor, as someone who should have known better, he failed the ultimate test of baseball. He failed integrity. He failed respect for the game. He failed to follow the rules that everyone else follows. He failed to take responsibility when given chances. He failed to understand that the game is bigger than any individual player. That's what the legends mean. That's why they turn their backs on him completely. That's why they speak with such clarity and conviction about why he doesn't belong in the Hall of Fame. Because character matters more than statistics. Because rules matter more than talent. Because the sport matters more than any individual player ever could or should. The legends have spoken, the truth has been told, and baseball will be stronger because of their voices and their unwavering commitment to protecting what they love most about the game.